I would now like to introduce our next speaker. Brendan Rogers is Deputy General Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Ireland, and he will sit on the UN Security Council from 2021 to 2022. I'm delighted to hand over to Brendan for him to speak with us here today.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Look, I'm delighted to be able to have the opportunity to speak to you about Ireland's winning a seat on the Security Council. We're taking our position on the 1st of January, and we'll be sitting as a non-permanent member for 2 years. And I thought today I'd just speak briefly on three aspects: the context of the campaign itself, and then a little bit about Global Ireland. Ireland has always looked, I think, beyond its borders. We've been invaded many times, and we've been no slouches in going abroad ourselves. We've had the Vikings, we've had our missionaries bringing Christianity all over Europe. So we have a history. It's in our DNA. To travel is in our DNA. And indeed, when our first parliament was set up in January 1919, the Parliament sent emissaries to the Paris Peace Conference, which was happening. So we sent emissaries there, and we made a formal application to join the League of Nations as well. And we were accepted as a member in 1923. So even our very first Parliament was immediately looking beyond our borders, and we felt that we needed to play an important role in that. Indeed, there was one particular patriot who was executed in 1803. His name was Robert Emmet, and he said, "When my country takes her place among the nations of the earth, then and only then let my epitaph be written." So we joined the League of Nations, and indeed one of my colleagues, previous colleague, Sean Lester, who was a member of the Department of External Affairs, as it then was called, left us to join the League of Nations, and he became a very senior civil servant there, and he became Deputy Secretary General of the League of Nations, and then he became the last Secretary General of the League of Nations, and he handed over all of the various assets of the League of Nations to the new organization, the United Nations, which came into being in 1945. Our first application to join the United Nations was actually vetoed by Russia, and it took us 9 years to become a member, and we eventually joined on the 14th of December 1955. But although we were excluded in those years, we were very active in some of the organs and the organizations of the United Nations, the ILO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, and ICAO. And then we joined, as I said, in December 1955, thanks to a resolution actually by the Canadians. And the next day, our Consul General, who was at our consulate in New York, finally took his seat. His name was Jack Conway, and he said, I was looking up some of the papers, he said that he was very warmly welcomed by the Secretary General, and that Ireland would be expected to play an important role in the activities of the UN. And the Canadian Foreign Minister, who was passing through Ireland a few days later, said at the airport, at Shannon Airport, "You should have been there 9 years ago, but it's not your fault, and certainly better late than never." And on my presentation, I was just going to show you some of the headlines in the Irish newspapers at that time. But we were very active. We were an active UN member from the beginning. And we set out our stall pretty clearly. And our Taoiseach, who's our Prime Minister at that time, gave a speech at Yale University in the United States in March 1956. And he set out some of our principles. He said that we were anti-communist, and he set out some of the Christian principles as well. But he also set out a series of values which really have lasted us to today: patient peacemakers, bridge builders, supporting international justice and peace and the rule of law and order, international law and order. And we also said that we would be strong supporters of the Charter, the UN Charter. We would be independent, and we would support the free world against communism. Um, so we became very active right from the start. And indeed, in 1958, we deployed our first peacekeeping group to the Lebanon from 1958. And since then, there has not been a day when Irish peacekeepers have not served throughout the world. And our first ambassador to the United Nations was a man called Freddie Boland. And he also became president of the General Assembly. It was the very first time and the only time that we've had that august position as president. Now, look, in relation to the Security Council, as I think, as most of you know, it's a key UN institution, and it's tasked with the preservation, basically, of peace and security. And probably of all of the UN organs, it's the one with the highest public profile. The Security Council has probably been shaped by the Second World War and shaped by the outcome of the Second World War, because we have the permanent 5 members, as you know, the US, UK, France, Russia, China, really, the club perhaps of victors of World War II, and each of them have a veto on Security Council resolutions. And then there's a group called the E10, which is the 10 elected members. And each member is elected for 2 years, and 5 are elected each year. Now, the Security Council, it's a powerful organ. It has the right to deploy peacekeeping missions, it enacts sanctions as well, and it also can authorize military operations. And some of you may recall, although many of you probably were very young at the time, during the invasion of Iraq, there was a big issue on the Security Council whether it would get a resolution or not, because resolutions are binding. Now, Ireland has served on the Security Council 3 times, in 1962 for a year, and then in 1980 and 81, and in 2001, 2002. And indeed, our first tenure on the Security Council was actually somewhat of a little bit of an accident, really. We were asked to do it. We didn't seek it. And I was looking, for my talk here today, I was looking through some of the historical papers. And it's very interesting looking at the telegrams going from New York to Dublin. And one of the telegrams said that our minister intimated that he's trying to find some other solution, but that ultimately we may have no alternative but to agree to go on the Security Council. And then back in Dublin, our Taoiseach, our Prime Minister, reported that he had requested the Minister for Foreign Affairs to avoid accepting membership, if at all possible, but had agreed that the Minister might accept if a deadlock arose that could not be otherwise resolved. So really, really strange, really, because we've been involved in difficult elections since, but we were kind of pushed into it, but that was really, really good, I guess. So we were there in 1962, and we were there during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And there's a very famous piece of video of the Russian leader Khrushchev banging his shoe on the table in front of him during that particular period. And indeed, our president of the General Assembly, Freddie Boland, was banging his gavel on the table as well, and he broke it. But I can tell you that afterwards, Khrushchev sent our president, our ambassador, he sent him a case of wine, saying, look, he apologized for that. So that's a little bit of color of that for you. In 1981 and 1982, we were on the Security Council for 2 years, and then 2001, 2002. In 1981, we were there for the Falklands Crisis, when Argentina invaded the Falklands, Las Malvinas, and the UK sent a flotilla, and there was basically a war, and we were involved on the Security Council at that time. But also there were other issues happening at that time as well. The issues in relation to the freedom of Namibia at that time was a very big issue, and also sanctions on Angola. So we were really deeply involved in some of the major international issues at that time. In 2001 and 2002, actually the current foreign minister of Russia, I think Lavrov, he was actually the Russian ambassador, the Soviet ambassador in New York at that time. So we became very well acquainted with each other. But that was the lead up to the invasion of Iraq, and issues in relation to the weapons of mass destruction, whether they existed in Iraq or not. But there was other issues at that time as well. East Timor independence was a big issue. So when you're on the Security Council, you're right in the middle of it. Now, look, we're about to take our seat for the fourth time. We declared that we would seek that seat in 2005. Norway declared in 2007, and then Canada declared rather late in 2016. They had lost in 2010, and then they declared in 2016. And we're a member of what's called the Western European and Other Group. So between 2005 and 2018, there's a slow build-up of support. We're talking to all of the other members. We're looking at what we call reciprocal votes. We will vote for you in this particular area if you can vote for us. But we didn't really launch our campaign until July 2018, and we did that in New York, and we had our Prime Minister, and we had a former president. We had a number of other ministers as well. And we also had Bono, maybe some of you know Bono of U2, who was a great supporter of our campaign. So we had a little bit of a splash during July, and we outlined our values, our principles, why we were standing, what it would mean, what we would do. And some people ask us, well, look, why look for a seat on the Security Council? Well, look, from our perspective, there are a number of key reasons. International peace and security is in Ireland's fundamental interest. We're a small, outward-facing nation. We like an open trading system, a system which values international law and justice is in our interest. We also have a very good reputation for a strong and active engagement at the United Nations. So we have a good reputation. In the past, we've made a real difference. I spoke to you a couple of moments ago about East Timor, Angola. So when we're on the Security Council, we step up to the mark and we try and make a difference. And we also know that small states can make a difference. And although there's a lot of criticism of the Security Council and the various failures of the UN and indeed the UN Security Council, we certainly can't, criticize it if we don't engage. So we have a responsibility to step up. So there's 193 members of the UN, and we have to persuade all of them to vote for us. So why vote for Ireland? Well, it's a secret vote, by the way. It's a secret vote, so nobody knows how any country votes. And the winner needs 2/3 of those votes. So 2/3 of those votes, we need to get them. So we said to all of them, you should vote for us because we've got a real commitment to the United Nations. We have a long history of commitment to the multilateral system, so we have that reputation. As I said before, since 1958, there's not been a day when Irish peacekeepers have not served. We are the largest per capita troop contributor in that We Are group that I spoke about. We've done over 70,000 tours of duty, and 87 of Irish lives have been lost in that. We've had a major role in nuclear non-proliferation. We drove part of the resolution that was eventually passed in 1961, and we were the first to sign it on nuclear non-proliferation. In one sense, it was called the Irish Resolution at one particular point. We've asked smaller nations to vote for us because we have a shared historical experience of colonialism, etc. So we have a shared experience. And also we've got a major commitment to development. Our aid program is recognized as being one of the highest quality aid programs in the world, development programs in the world. And also we are one of the largest donors in the world. We've fallen back a little bit, but we're still up there in the top table. Now we had to gather together, and we did that in April of 2018 in New York. What would be the themes of our campaign? I mean, we had to persuade people to vote for us, the countries to vote for us, but we also needed some overarching themes. And we came up with 3 themes: empathy, partnership, independence. And empathy was our shared lived history, our experience of famine, our development program, the work of our non-governmental organizations, the work of our missionaries, or the development work throughout the world, our conflict experience in Northern Ireland. We understood the complexities of peace building, peacemaking, peacekeeping, peace protecting. And we also knew the real importance of the role of women and young people in peace. So we felt that we have a real empathy with many member states of the United Nations. We also had partnership. We know that partnership has brought peace to Ireland. We worked within the UN on developing and driving the Sustainable Development Goals. We work in partnership with the UN funds and programs, and we see ourselves as bridge builders. So we thought, yes, empathy, then partnership. And thirdly, independence. So in the past on the Security Council, we've demonstrated an independence and a kind of a consistency. We don't have a partisan agenda. We support the multilateral system. We're committed to reform. It needs to be more representative. The Security Council really is not representative of the modern world. So we had those areas: empathy, partnership, independence, and we promoted them. We had a video, which I hope to show you, promoting all of those themes. Now, look, in the campaign, let me tell you, every single vote counts. Every single vote, every single one. There's 193 of us. We vote for ourselves, so we needed 192 other votes. And no vote can be taken for granted. So every single member state must be approached again and again. Our reputation is really important. Our record is really important. But I think on this campaign, less than before, we live in a more transactional world. You can't just live on your reputation. So it's about, what are you doing now? What are you going to do? What are you going to do for us? What are your values? What are your principles? How will you make a difference? We also had to look at different regions of the world. What were their needs? We looked at the small island developing states, for example. And we organized an oceans conference in Ireland, and about 30 of the small island developing states came to Ireland, and we had a really rich dialogue over 2 days in some of the key issues that concern them in relation to all of the issues: development, sustainability, climate change, the oceans, all of those. And we had and they all met our president, they met our prime minister, they met our foreign minister. So they had a real engagement, a real deep and rich engagement, that we could be on the Security Council and see climate change, the issues in relation to the oceans, as a security issue, not just something that sometimes others want to box away as not being a security issue. We also had to keep the momentum up. So we had our Oceans Wealth Conference, but we also organized a number of other conferences on girls' education, for example. We also participated in a number of UN climate change conferences, and we needed to be there at a very high level. I'd also say the role of an ambassador in New York, the UN ambassador, I cannot underemphasize that or overestimate that. The ambassador is so important. The ambassador connects with all those other 192 other ambassadors. Personal relationships are important. That connectivity, the chemistry, the conversations. And we have a fantastic ambassador, a lady in New York, and she was indefatigable in talking to people, getting beneath the surface in terms of what are the issues that animate countries, animate people. And other ambassadors knew that if we get our seat on the Security Council, it's Ambassador Geraldine Byrne-Nason who will be sitting there. So those personal relationships are important, the ambassador is important. I don't want to overemphasize it, because it's probably less important than it was in 1962 or even in 1981-82, because now we have immediate communications, and I think there tends to be more centralized control from foreign ministries. In the past, I think ambassadors could probably decide sometimes who they voted on, particularly in some of the smaller countries, and communications were not good. But that connectivity between the ambassador and the UN ambassadors is still really important. As well as that, we also appointed a number of campaign envoys. These were normally retired ambassadors with language skills, with deep experience, and with knowledge of different parts of the world. And they traveled out to those parts of the world, connected in with the decision makers, basically promoted our candidature, and communicated what we hope to do, our overall themes, but also calibrated those themes to the needs of the area in which they were visiting. So we were out in the Pacific Islands, we were in the Middle East, we were in Asia, we were in Europe, we were in Latin America. So and those envoys really worked hard. And then there was a huge role of the embassies. All our embassies as well throughout the world were busy reporting on what the opposition, the competition were doing, but also in and out of the foreign ministries in the countries where they were accredited to, but also in what we call secondary accreditations. Other countries where we don't have embassies, but the ambassador is accredited perhaps from a next door country. So they were traveling all the time, promoting, reporting back to us at HQ. So all the time there was this fluid communication and we were able to adapt. So for example, if an ambassador was reporting that in a particular country they have some concerns or issues, we were able to bring them back, think about them, see if we could manage that. So it's a very fluid, organic response to the campaign. Um, I have to say the role of our president was fantastic. He has a huge international reputation, President Higgins. He came behind the campaign and he was out in New York for two general assemblies. He was talking to people, he was talking to other heads of state, he was making the case. We also had our prime minister and our ministers. So for example, in the General Assembly, which takes place every September for 2 weeks, on one point we had 8 politicians from the president downwards there talking to their counterparts. We had over 100 meetings in about 7 or 8 days. We also, very important, we had to keep the public with us. I mean, this was not, our campaign was not something being delivered by a small cadre of people in the Department of Foreign Affairs. we wanted citizens on board as well. So we were very careful that we had a very active promotion campaign on social media, in the public area, with videos, etc., in the media, in the more mainstream media. And in general, people supported us. You have to have the public, it's very important to have the public behind you. The competition, Norway and Canada, very strong. Our friends share our principles, share our values, but they're different in some ways. Canada did not get elected in 2010, so it almost was an appalling vista that they would not get elected again. Norway is a really big player in development, the largest developed assistance contributor in the world, huge reputation, and Canada, a great heft as really well. So it was really a tough competition. And then COVID struck. Was this a game changer? Well, you know, in some respects, there are different views on this. Ireland is really good on the ground. We connect with people, we talk to people, we build a chemistry. What would happen if we were online? And maybe we would not be able to make as much headway. Now, my own view is actually, in some respects, it didn't affect us one way or another. We had some political difficulties at home because there were government negotiations. So our politicians would not have been as available to travel, but they were absolutely available online. So in many respects, we were able to have as many meetings, and our ambassador in New York was online all of the time. So my considered view is that it didn't really affect us. We had a last public event in March in Radio City Music Hall in New York. It was called Riverdance 25. Some of you may have seen this amazing show of Irish and global dance called Riverdance. And we had a show in New York and we brought all of the ambassadors to it on the 10th of March in New York in Radio City Music Hall. I was there. I can't believe we were all there with 5,000 people. And then 2 weeks later, with the pandemic, everything was closed. And that was our last public engagement. So after that, really, it was a ground war, as it were, online all of the time. And then the vote came along on the 17th, and we got through. We won with Norway. It was fantastic. I couldn't believe the actual public outpouring at home. I think the COVID had really everyone flattened. So this was a really good news story. I was personally surprised. In one sense, I thought the public see this as something that's done, as I said, by people in an ivory tower. But there was a great outpouring of support. And now we're faced with, 2 years of really hard work. We've been preparing since early January of this year So we were preparing 6 months before the vote, and we have got to be successful. So we've got to put in place really excellent teams. We've done that. Excellent team in New York, excellent team at HQ, and we've been working again with all of our ambassadors, particularly those in conflict related areas. 70% of the Security Council's work relates to Africa, about 10% to the Middle East, 12%, and the rest to other parts of the world. So we have a team in New York engaged, preparing. The three themes we have really, and we've outlined these in the last month, is we'll be focused on building peace, essentially, strengthening prevention of conflict, and ensuring accountability as well. Just lastly, let me say that Ireland launched a major new initiative 2 years ago called Global Ireland 2025. And this is a key objective of the government, which is to double Ireland's impact and our footprint globally by 2025. And that means, of course, adding around 26 new embassies. It means deepening those embassies, strengthening other embassies. It also means working with our state agencies, but it also means other things. It means working with our diaspora, working with our cultural institutions as well, to double that influence, to double the impact, to double the footprint. And we see the Security Council as being part of that. It's not something that's separate from what we do. It's something that Ireland is doing as part of a further strengthening of our global footprint. So it's a really, really exciting time. 2 years of hard work. There's going to be crises. There's going to be challenges, but we're up for it. We're looking forward to working with all of the other member states of the United Nations and to making a difference in our way. We're realistic, by the way, about what you can do, what you can't do. You have to work within the system, but we feel we can make a difference, and I'm looking forward to being there on the journey. I was going to finish with with a lovely video, which is our video for the UN campaign, but unfortunately I can't. But just thank you very much for listening to me today. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Brendan. We have a question for you from an attendee. They ask, what is the biggest challenge for Ireland in the UN Security Council, being a small country and having to work with the so-called Big Five?
Well, good question. The biggest challenge will be making the difference. Like, the work of the United Nations Security Council has tripled since we were last on it. And a lot of it is very, very predictable work. There are things like sanctions committees, subsidiary bodies, peacekeeping, all of those things which could take up all of your time. But what you have to do is do that, step up to the mark, but you have to make a difference then in terms of international peace, security, conflict resolution. To do that means you've got to have a door open into the P5. They're the ones who run the Security Council. The E10 change every 2 years, and therefore it's harder for them to make that difference. So what we've been doing for the last couple of years is talking to those members of the E10 with similar values and principles. And there's a kind of a collegial body building up now within the E10, which simply means that we can, challenge the P5 in a constructive way as a group and not allow ourselves to be ticked off. So we're going to work very closely with most members of the E10, but also we've pretty good relations with all of the P5. Actually, we built those relations over decades. So, and we feel that they believe that we're independent and we're open, and I think they will work closely with us. It's going to be a challenge, there's no doubt about that. But I think by working closely with the E10, getting their support, having a united front, we've only focused on those three things. So we're not saying that we can change everything, but those are three areas that we can make a difference in. And we need to focus. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you, Brendan. I have one last question for you. Any suggestions for students who want to take an international career path?
Wow, that's look, my suggestion firstly is do the best in terms of your academic work. Get your basic degree. When you're out of that, have a look at a master's degree. Then there are a number of graduate entry level opportunities available, both in the UN. For example, I worked with the UN for a while as a junior professional officer. I was supported by my own government at the time. And it's a great way to enter the UN system for 2 years. And you're really treated as an equal there, and you're giving a lot of work to do, and you really can cut your teeth on that. So I would say for those out there listening who've been interested in an international career, that's one way into the junior professional officer. Those who are coming from the EU, there are lots of opportunities both through Erasmus and through graduate entry into the European Union as well. I would also say that try and get yourself involved in civil society organizations, Amnesty International, some of the larger NGOs, non-government. We have some really, really good ones in Ireland, but there's some brilliant ones internationally, International Rescue Committee. Get your experience, get out on the ground, get your feet on the ground. And when you do that and you get that under your belt, and then you're looking to play a role in your own foreign service or in an international institution, you've already got that in your pocket. Do that as soon as you can. I did that myself. I was in Zambia for a number of years. So when I came back to my own department, I then went into the development side of the house, and you just had so much more experience at that particular point. And never take no for an answer. Knock on as many doors as you possibly can. Eventually one door opens. I see that so much in young people I've mentored over the years. So be there, be energized. Think about what is the area that's of interest to you. Is it conflict prevention? Is it climate change? There are so many. Migration. There are areas at the moment, by the way, that are really going to be important. Migration is never going to go away. Human rights issues, climate change, the environment. Think about the areas as well where the real needs are. And I think focus on those areas as well.